residue, and why is it important?
Well, it's forensic evidence, one. It's not somebody whispering in your ear. It's even better than document. Because the forensic evidence, as I found out over the months in 1997, was one, consistent with the residue you would expect to find from burned solid fuel from a missile. But also, didn't know this until mid-1997, had a recently retired scientist from the warhead industry look at the elements and the percentages and said that because of the 18% magnesium and the 12% calcium and those types of things, he said, Sanders, what you actually have in here is a current generation incendiary warhead on top of a solid fuel missile that will produce an intense localized burning in order to bring that plane down. And in fact, we did in that trail, that intense localized trail in the reddish-orange residue, they all start at the same place and go off their various and separate ways.
Wow, where was the red residue found? Was it found throughout the planes? Where was it?
Very localized area, right there where the right wing meets the fuselage, and going from right to left on, through the plane on row 17, 18, and 19, the tops and the backs of the seats.
So you're saying in the initial information that you looked at from the debris field, the very seats that were the first to exit the plane,
correct,
in that row, those were also the seats that had this red residue on it?
Yeah, exclusive to those areas.
Okay. The residue seats is consistent according to lab tests, consistent right with solid fuel for a missile?
Right. And current generation, because this is brand new technology, and I've confirmed this through 2 Navy officers who fire these missiles from their planes. In fact, it is current generation warhead technology.
But Jim, there is a $40 million investigation out there among some of the best experts in the world, supposedly, including military, including Navy, and including missile people, who say there's no evidence of a missile or exploding or even passing through the airplane, and it was a center fuel tank that exploded because of fumes. What evidence do you have against that?
I recently obtained photos that no one, until this last week, has ever seen.
Well,
these are, I'll tell you exactly what they say. There's a series of photos that are in 4 segments.
But how did you get these photos if nobody else could?
I don't, for all I know, because the judges, there are 4 federal judges that have told me that journalists cannot have photos unless the federal government says they can. So when they show up at my house, I assume that the federal government wanted me to have them. I didn't ask for them, I have them. You might try asking for them, and then you'll find out if everybody can get them.
Well, how do you know that these are photos of debris?
Because they are directly from the NTSB. There is no doubt about it. You have documents attached to each photo. It describes what they are. There is no question about it. What it shows is, and their documents state that there's this external to internal force. That plane underneath in the belly, right where the right wing meets it, explodes upward and bends all this metal all the way up into the passenger cabin in the area of row 17, 18, and 19, and going back on the right side of that plane.
Well, couldn't this, I mean, obviously the fuel tank, for those who don't know, the center fuel tank sits between like about rows 17 and 20.
Yeah, it actually starts about row 20 and goes back.
Okay, and it goes back, and it's under. Well, it's the center of the airplane, basically the people are sitting on top of. Why wouldn't, if it exploded, wouldn't that have sent...
It would have had to jump out of the plane and come underneath, because what you see is the underside of the bottom of the plane being blown into the center wing tank, and then from there all the way up into the passenger cabin.
Well, why haven't we seen these pictures? I mean, why hasn't the general public seen those pictures? Obviously, if they're some kind of public document or some kind of document that goes along with the investigation.
Well, I can tell you why. It's because I then have follow-on series of photos showing how they took this massive amount of upward bending metal, they cut off the offending parts, the parts that were bending upward, they lay them out, and I have photos showing it being laid out on the floor in Calverton Hangar, not for everybody to see, obviously. It's over somewhere, but somebody's taken photos of this. They lay it out on the floor, and then they massively crushed it downward It had been blown upward. They crushed it downward so that it would fit an internal explosion.
Are you telling me, are among these pictures of them actually crushing it down?
I have them as there's three guys standing there, and I don't know if they're part of the people that did that. I have them actually cutting off pieces. You can see these huge pieces that were cut off from the right wing. They were still attached to the right wing when they came into the hangar. That was cut off, put down on the floor, along with the other massive pieces from the floor of the center wing tank. You see those photos as they're in neutral position, not showing, at this point, they no longer show upward or downward. They're laid out on the floor, and then the next series of photos I have show them massively crushed downward over the keel beam.
Why aren't these photos published or in some magazine or in some forum or why aren't we seeing these on network television?
You're not going to see them on network television unless a feeding frenzy starts outside of network television. Network television, NBC, ABC, ad nauseum, they have in fact committed themselves 100% to telling the government story, and they would be enormously, as a bare minimum, embarrassed by the fact that they, the gods of news, couldn't even notice some of the things that were going wrong. The reason you don't see these things is because I rather suspect they were never supposed to be seen.
Which gets back into who sent them to you and how you got them.
I don't know, but I believe that I was authorized to receive them.
Because the government says you can't have them unless you're authorized.
No, the federal judges in the Second Circuit say that it's a conspiracy.
Okay,
yeah.
Well, are you then talking about a missile then being the object that causes the upward thrust of metal to go through the airplane?
Absolutely. First of all, there's a core group of witnesses who saw a missile coming from south to north towards that plane at the last second. It jogs upward and into the belly of the plane.
But the CIA and the FBI and every NTSB and experts say, no, people are misguided, confused, maybe they were drunk, maybe they had too many parties going that night, and that it's fuel coming down, just briefly.
Well, you have very nicely summarized what they allege. Does that sound like experts talking, that everybody on Long Island is either drunk or contemplating their toes? No one on Long Island stands there and looks at planes or stands there and sees objects coming up. They only see things falling down. Absolute nonsense.
Okay, but the FBI is experienced in investigating all kinds of, and basically they were from the terrorist task force too.
FBI has no experience investigating missiles striking airplanes. Zero experience. None. And they obviously, if you read those 755 witness reports, you will find that 95% of those are incompetently written. Absolutely incompetently written.
Okay, well, if that's the case, if there's something external that comes up through the airplane, if it's a missile, then where does the missile come from? The Navy says that they weren't having any exercises out there that night. We didn't have anything close. The NTSB did a bunch of Stinger tests here recently. So if there's, so are you saying then it came from terrorists? If there was no military?
No, I'm not. First of all, they were using the Navy's own documents. There were, use their words, not mine, significant naval units, their words, in the area that night, number one. Second, national security was used to protect that knowledge of what those units were and where they were. Third, FAA and Navy radar, all that we have the database for, massive databases that we've been able to obtain, show what appear to be significant naval units right where their documents say they had significant naval units. They also have a 450-knot apparent drone that streaks by within the backside of TWA Flight 800 shortly before it explodes. Perhaps a drone, perhaps something else, but there's activity in the air at 98,000 feet just to the west of Flight 800. There is a military asset at 98,000 feet going 20 miles an hour.
At 98,000 feet going 20 miles an hour?
Yes.
Okay, well, so what, that can't be a satellite because they even go faster than that.
And they're not at 98,000 feet.
No.
It can't be an SR-71. And I got this from a retired colonel who said it is, without any doubt, from the Lockheed Skunk
For
Works.
somebody else who might want to be an investigator, or someone who might, a congressman or something like that, say, okay, Sanders, put up or shut up. Show me the documents. Have you got the material that you can show them?
I have a vast amount of material I can show them in an organized form that takes the four elements. When you go, you have the radar, you have the witnesses, you have the debris field, and you have the mock-up. If you eliminate the garbage that's been put out by the government and just look at the evidence, they all connect.
Well, then why aren't members of the FBI or somebody else coming and saying, show us this, Mr. Sanders? I mean, if you can prove that it was something other than what all of these experts say, show us.
If somebody,
Did they ever come to you and say?
well, they come and give me stuff, and they come and give me direction, but only as long as they aren't personally on the line.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're saying that you would like to see that, some kind of a public forum in which they say put up or shut up?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, you've already had a public forum, you and your wife. You were arrested and charged with what?
Conspiring with a source inside the investigation to obtain evidence of government criminal behavior.
Well, as I remember, the indictment didn't say that you were conspiring to find information that was evidence of government.
Well, that's shorthanding it. It says I asked a source to give me evidence, and that evidence is of their criminal behavior.
Oh, okay, but basically you were charged with conspiring to have parts of a plane crash removed.
No.
Okay.
First of all, I didn't ask, but and on the stand, the source
Tell me.
said I didn't ask, but I made it clear I would receive it and have it tested. It was residue. It wasn't part of any plane. It was just residue.
Oh, this red residue.
The red residue, right, exactly.
Okay, so, but anyway, you've had your public forum.
No, I haven't had my public forum.
Well, I mean, weren't you in federal court? Weren't you and your wife in federal court?
The judge ruled that we could not use the First Amendment to defend ourselves. The First Amendment was to be eliminated from that courtroom. We could not even show the front page article from March 10th, 1997. She would not even allow the jury to see that article.
Of the article and the president.
When I first put out my evidence against the government, I could not tell why the government came after me, nor could I even give, in a more neutral forum, what I had uncovered. We had no ability to put on a defense.
Okay, in the last few seconds, you and your wife, Liz, whom we're going to have in the next segment, you are told what happens. You're convicted, aren't you? I mean,
Yeah, it took them 45 minutes to come back and say we're guilty of conspiracy
Okay.
with a source. A journalist can conspire with a source.
Thank you.